CBS Young, and the Restless spoilers next week, the 2nd of March 2026 to the 6th of March 2026. Kane Ashby did not walk into Phyllis Summers' orbit unprepared. He never did anything without calculation anymore, not after everything he had lost, rebuilt, and nearly lost again. When he made the decision to visit Phyllis, it was not driven by nostalgia or ego but by urgency. The shifting power structure around Newman Enterprises had begun to feel volatile, and Kane understood that volatility was dangerous for everyone connected to it, especially for Lily Winters and the twins. He convinced himself that this visit was strategic, even noble in intention. If he could persuade Phyllis to transfer Newman Enterprises back into Victor Newman's control, stability would return, or at least that was the narrative he rehearsed in his mind. Victor thrived in chaos, yes, but he also imposed order once he had reclaimed dominance. Kane believed that the safest path forward for Lily and the children was one where the unpredictable experiment of Phyllis' authority came to an end. Yet he also knew that convincing Phyllis would require more than logic. It would require leverage. Phyllis, however, had never been a woman easily cornered, and she sensed immediately that Kane was not simply dropping by for a friendly exchange. There was a particular intensity in his posture, a tension coiled beneath his calm demeanor. When he hinted that he had something she desperately wanted, something significant enough to make her consider a deal, her curiosity flickered but did not overpower her skepticism. Phyllis had spent her life navigating promises disguised as opportunities. She had been underestimated, betrayed, discarded, and resurrected more times than most could survive. Power, for her, was not merely about corporate control. It was validation. It was proof that she could not be dismissed or manipulated again. Kane's suggestion that he possessed a bargaining chip capable of swaying her felt almost insulting. What could he possibly offer that rivaled the intoxicating sense of authority she currently wielded? As Kane elaborated, carefully, strategically, he framed his proposal as mutually beneficial. Victor's return to the helm would restore balance, he argued, and Phyllis could exit with dignity and reward. He implied knowledge, hinted at information or access that might tempt her ambition. But what he underestimated was the transformation Phyllis had undergone. She was no longer scrambling for relevance or scrambling to prove herself. In this moment, she was experiencing something she had chased for years: unfiltered influence. The boardrooms that once excluded her now revolved around her decisions. The whispers that once questioned her stability now analyzed her strategy. To surrender that feeling, even for profit, would be to relinquish a hard-won sense of self. Phyllis listened, eyes sharp, expression unreadable, but her internal verdict was forming quickly. Kane's offer lacked one critical element: dominance. It required her to step aside voluntarily, to acknowledge that her reign was temporary, conditional, negotiable. That was not a language she spoke anymore. She had not clawed her way to this position only to hand it back under the guise of pragmatism. When she finally responded, her rejection was not explosive but cool, almost amused. She made it clear that whatever Kane thought he had, it was not enough. Nothing, in her current state of empowerment, compared to the sensation of commanding Newman Enterprises. Kane's composure thinned at the edges. He had anticipated resistance, but he had also expected cracks, moments of hesitation he could exploit. Instead, he found a wall. The frustration simmering beneath his surface was fueled not only by Phyllis' refusal but by the ticking clock in his mind. Lily Winters and the twins were his priority, and the unpredictability of Phyllis' leadership made him uneasy. He did not trust her restraint. He did not trust her impulses. And he certainly did not trust that she would avoid dragging Lily into the crossfire of whatever corporate storm was brewing. When he left that encounter, it was with a renewed resolve rather than resignation. If persuasion would not work, pressure might. Inwardly, he swore that Phyllis would regret dismissing him, that she would eventually understand the cost of ignoring his warning. Elsewhere, the undercurrents of tension were shifting in a different direction. Holden, ever the quiet shield in Audra Charles' life, moved to reassure her after Claire Grace Newman's inquiries. Claire's instinct for uncovering hidden truths had always been formidable, and the fact that she had begun digging into Holden and Audra's past could have posed a serious threat. Yet Holden maintained that Claire had not uncovered anything substantial. His tone was steady, meant to calm, but beneath it lay the fatigue of someone constantly managing secrets. He had grown accustomed to absorbing suspicion, redirecting scrutiny, and protecting Audra from fallout. In this instance, he assured her that Claire's curiosity had reached a dead end. Audra, pragmatic as ever, processed the information with a calculated calm. She learned that Claire had ended things with Holden because she sensed deception, because she felt he was hiding something. Rather than react with guilt or alarm, Audra interpreted the situation as strategically advantageous. A clean break meant fewer emotional complications, fewer variables. If Claire believed she had removed herself from a web of secrets, she might be less inclined to tug at its threads. Audra even encouraged Holden to move forward, to find someone new, as though his romantic life were a separate, compartmentalized issue. It was a suggestion that revealed her priorities clearly. She valued Holden, relied on him, but she would not allow sentiment to interfere with forward momentum. Her focus now lay firmly with her new role at Spectre Charles Media. The opportunity represented expansion, influence, and independence. For Audra, professional ascension was not merely about prestige, it was about control. In a world where alliances shifted quickly and loyalties proved fragile, corporate power offered a semblance of permanence. She refused to let Claire's suspicions derail her concentration. If anything, the breakup between Claire and Holden simplified matters. With fewer emotional entanglements, Audra could direct her energy towards solidifying her authority within the company. Yet pragmatism did not entirely erase caution. Audra understood that assumptions could be dangerous. While she believed Claire's departure reduced immediate risk, she was not naive enough to assume Claire would retreat quietly forever. The Newman instinct for retaliation was well documented, and Claire carried that bloodline's determination. For that reason, Audra wanted confirmation directly from Claire herself. She wanted clarity, a statement of intent, assurance that Claire would not circle back with renewed hostility. It was not about seeking approval but about eliminating uncertainty. In Audra's world, uncertainty was the true enemy. As these parallel conflicts unfolded, a pattern emerged. Kane sought to dismantle Phyllis' hold on Newman Enterprises out of protective instinct and strategic foresight, yet underestimated the depth of her transformation. Phyllis, intoxicated by authority, dismissed compromise and risked provoking a more aggressive response. Holden continued to position himself as Audra's safeguard, even at personal cost, while Audra recalibrated her focus toward corporate dominance, viewing personal fractures as manageable collateral. And Claire, though temporarily sidelined, remained an unpredictable variable, her pride and curiosity unlikely to fade entirely. The tension between ambition and protection threaded through each storyline. Kane's fear for Lily and the twins drove him toward confrontation. Phyllis' hunger for validation fortified her resistance. Holden's loyalty anchored him in secrets, while Audra's ambition propelled her forward. None of them operated in isolation. Each decision reverberated outward, creating subtle fractures that could widen under pressure. For now, the battlefield was psychological rather than explosive. Words had replaced weapons, insinuations replaced ultimatums, but beneath the polished exchanges lay something volatile. Kane would not accept defeat quietly. Phyllis would not relinquish power easily. Audra would not tolerate interference in her ascent. And Claire, whether reassured or not, would not forget the taste of suspicion. The question was not whether these tensions would collide, but when and which alliance would fracture first when ambition and loyalty inevitably clashed. Billy Abbott refused to accept that what stood between him and Sally Spectre was simply distance or timing. In his mind, what they were experiencing was not an ending but a pause, not rejection but hesitation. So when he prepared to welcome her for what she assumed would be a polite, adult goodbye, Billy had already reframed the night entirely. The candles were not about closure. The music was not about nostalgia. The atmosphere was not about surrender. To Billy, this was not a farewell dinner. It was, as he would boldly define it, a full-scale campaign to win her back. And Billy, when convinced of something, did not believe in half measures. Sally arrived with composure carefully stitched into every movement. She told herself this evening was about dignity, to grown adults acknowledging that something beautiful had run its course. She had rehearsed restraint, prepared herself to smile, to thank him for the memories, to leave without unraveling. She believed she understood Billy's patterns well enough to anticipate charm, perhaps even sentimentality. What she had not fully prepared for was the intensity in his eyes, the unmistakable determination that this was not a man ready to let go. When Billy urged honesty, not surface-level pleasantries but something deeper, something raw, Sally hesitated. She had always been selective about which layers of herself she revealed. Yet there was something about Billy's insistence that stripped away her defenses. She began to speak, cautiously at first, about her childhood. About a father who was brilliant in imagination but unreliable in execution, a man who promised castles and delivered cardboard cutouts. A dreamer who saw opportunity everywhere but rarely followed through. Growing up in that shadow had carved something complicated into Sally's heart. She learned early that belief without action was dangerous, that hope, unguarded, could become humiliation. Her father's endless optimism had left her craving stability and terrified of disappointment. She had loved him, fiercely, but she had also learned not to depend on him. Billy listened, and for once he did not interrupt. He recognized echoes of his own history in her words, the push and pull between grand ambition and the fear of failure. Carefully, perhaps too carefully, he suggested that maybe Sally's father had never truly had anyone who believed in him. Maybe he had been a man drowning in doubt, projecting confidence because he felt none. Billy's intention was not accusation but compassion. He was trying to reframe her pain, to shift blame away from the child who had waited for promises to materialize. Yet Sally heard something else entirely. To her, it sounded like implication, as though Billy were subtly suggesting that her disappointment had contributed to her father's collapse. That her inability to believe had mirrored the world's refusal to believe. The idea pierced deeper than Billy anticipated. Sally stiffened, anger flashing not because she misunderstood him entirely but because the wound was still tender. She had spent years convincing herself she was not responsible for anyone else's broken dreams. Hearing even a hint of that possibility reopened something she thought she had sealed shut. Billy quickly pushed back, clarifying that it was not what he meant at all. He insisted he was trying to defend her father, not accuse her. But Sally's hurt had already surfaced, and with it came something else, resentment. She shifted the focus sharply, accusing Billy of making a choice that mirrored her father's patterns. When it mattered, when she needed certainty, he had chosen Chancellor. He had chosen ambition, legacy, ego. He had chosen something that felt abstract and corporate over something human and immediate. To Sally, that was not a joint decision. That was abandonment disguised as strategy. Billy's frustration flickered, but not with anger, more with disbelief. In his mind, he had not chosen Chancellor over her. He had chosen it with her. He envisioned a shared empire, a fresh start outside the suffocating expectations of legacy names. He saw an opportunity for them to build something that belonged solely to them, untainted by Victor, by Jack, by anyone else's shadow. He genuinely believed he was creating a foundation for their happiness. The company was not a rival to their love. It was, in his mind, the proof of it. It was the future he thought they were crafting together. This was the fracture between them. Sally equated stability with presence. Billy equated stability with expansion. She wanted to feel prioritized emotionally. He wanted to secure them strategically. Both believed they were acting out of devotion. Both felt betrayed by the other's interpretation. Billy's voice softened as he tried to anchor them in something undeniable, their shared memories. He reminded her of Nice, of the warmth of the Mediterranean air, of the impulsive vulnerability that had defined that night. She had written "I love you" on his hand in a moment of unfiltered emotion. It had not been performative. It had not been calculated. It had been real. Billy carried that memory like a talisman. To him, it was proof that beneath their fear and ambition, something genuine existed. Without hesitation, he reached for her hand now and wrote the words back to her, "I love you." It was not dramatic, it was deliberate. He wanted her to see that he was not retreating, not negotiating, not hedging. He was declaring. He encouraged her to remember what she had felt that night, to engrave that certainty into her heart instead of the doubts that had since grown louder. Billy believed love, when chosen boldly enough, could override misalignment. He believed that if they returned to that core truth, everything else could be recalibrated. Sally looked down at the words on her skin and felt a storm of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to believe him, to surrender to the simplicity of that declaration. Part of her remembered her father's promises and the way belief had once left her exposed. Billy's intensity was intoxicating, but it was also frightening. He was offering devotion wrapped in ambition, romance intertwined with risk. And Sally had spent her entire life trying to decipher the difference between a dream worth chasing and a dream destined to collapse. Billy saw this as their moment of reclamation. Sally saw it as a crossroads. To accept his campaign meant trusting that this time, the dream would be backed by action. To walk away meant protecting herself from repeating the pattern that had shaped her childhood. Neither choice was simple. Neither was safe. The candles flickered quietly as silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Billy believed he had reignited something undeniable. Sally felt the warmth, yes, but she also felt the shadow of uncertainty creeping at its edges. Love alone had never been the problem between them. It was how they defined loyalty, how they prioritized ambition, how they navigated fear. As Billy waited for her response, convinced that passion and persistence would win the night, Sally wrestled with the realization that the question was no longer whether she loved him. The question was whether loving him would lead her toward the stability she craved or back into the familiar ache of promises that shimmered beautifully but dissolved when she needed them most.